Uh, we'll be discussing more about his new book, Immortal India, which has been divided into four main parts, social issues, religion and mythology, history, and some personal musings. And after he has to catch a flight, as usual, he is very busy. So we'll be stopping around 10:45. I'll give you some time for I have a lot of questions to ask him, but still.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. There is a flight that I need to catch to Mumbai because I have another program in the evening. I'm so sorry. So I'll be rushing at 10:45. Yeah. But I will answer everything, even from you guys.
Thank you. Okay, I'll start the session with Amish. I would like to ask you a question first. You are a very established and hugely successful fiction writer. What made you switch to non-fiction?
How it works for me is those who've read my books. I'm assuming you guys have read my books, right? Who has not read my books out here? No one? Okay, so everyone has read my books. Okay, good. Those who have read my books will know that my books normally begin with some philosophy, with some non-fiction philosophy that I want to convey, and the fiction is usually a wrapper around that non-fiction to convey it. So, like the Shiva trilogy, the philosophy at the heart of it was an exploration on this question: what is evil? The philosophy at the heart of the Ramchandra series is what is an ideal society. So for me, the way I write books, normally step one is non-fiction, is the philosophy, and step two is the story, the wrapper around that non-fiction. So actually then Immortal India in a way is actually step one itself, without the step two, without the wrapper of a story.
Okay. Like you said, in the Shiva trilogy, you were talking about Shiva is the apt God for our times. We live in a time of contradictions. What are these contradictions actually?
No, everyone has a right to find their own path to the divine. That is the Indian way. There's a lovely Sanskrit line in the Rig Veda. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. Truth is one, but the wise speak it as many. Okay. Lord Shiva, I think, is the perfect path to the divine for those of us who are rebellious by nature. So I am by nature a rebellious, anti-elitist kind of person. I naturally tend to be that way. So for people like me and for many members of our youth, they find Lord Shiva exciting because Lord Shiva is in a way a god of the rebels, right? But everyone has different paths to the divine, Some can like Lord Ram, some find inspiration in Allah, some in Jesus Christ. That's, what works for you is what works for you. But for those of us who are rebellious, anti-elitist kind of people, I guess Lord Shiva is ideal for that. But because he, as a god, is a very rebellious kind of god. He is in many ways very contradictory. He is naturally anti-elitist. He's very respectful of his wife. He treats his devotees with respect. So he is in a way a very a god of the rebels, rebellious, kind of cool. No disrespect to any other god. Very cool, hip god. That's what one of my youthful readers had said. Lord Shiva is the dude of the gods.
But actually, your second series was on Ramachandra. He's the opposite to Lord Shiva, isn't it? So he's not at all rebellious. He sticks to the rules. He's called Maryada Purushottam. But how are you attracted to these extremes?
The thing is that there are why are there so many different paths to the divine? Because there are different messages needed at different points of time and different messages needed for different types of people. Right? So for example, a society like Japan is a very compliant society, right? Okay. how many of you had seen that video in Japan where Japan had a tsunami at all also, some years ago there was an earthquake and there was a tsunami, and if you remember there was a hurricane in the US as well, right? Everyone's heard of Hurricane Katrina. What had happened in the US when Hurricane Katrina hit there? Anyone wants to guess what happened? In New Orleans, when the hurricane hit, did society just collapse? Was there looting? Was there chaos? Or was everyone still following the law in New Orleans, in America? What happened out there? Chaos, right? Complete chaos. People were looting, no one was following the law, the police themselves was, doing God knows what not. But in Japan, same situation. I'm sure everyone must have, it's a very famous video on YouTube, okay? There is a flood waters are rising. There are some 10 people stuck on top of a roof of a house, and a boat has come to pick them. And there's complete chaos. Those people had, those poor Japanese had been stuck there for some 48 hours, and they were desperately trying to escape. But all those Japanese out there, they all stood in line. They got in one by one, quietly, discipline, following the law. Whereas if that situation had happened in India, what do you think would have happened? All 20 people would be fighting each other. We'd be fighting the boatman. Arey, get me in first. We'd probably sink the boat. God knows what all would happen. Correct. So because our culture is different, Japanese culture is different. So if you think about it, what is the message required for India now? That maybe, just maybe, we should learn to follow rules also a little bit. Correct? Because there's too much chaos in India. Maybe Lord Ram's message has some need for us. Like if it's 12:30 in the night and you've come to a traffic signal and it's red, just stop, no? There's no need to break the signal. But Indians love breaking the laws. Whereas Japan needs to learn a little bit of rebelliousness. Because they are too compliant. Their economy has not been growing for the last 20 years, but they are not able to change. So they need a little bit of rebelliousness. Whereas India needs a little bit of, let's follow the rules a little bit at least. Maybe Lord Ram's message has some resonance.
In this book, somewhere I read that you have classified human societies into masculine and feminine, having masculine characters and feminine characters. Can you please explain?
I should just clarify that has nothing to do with men and women. It's just a term. It's like yin and yang. Yeah, I prefer, it's just the limitations of the English language that I use masculine, feminine. In Sanskrit, we would use Suryavanshi, Chandravanshi, right? Now, the Suryavanshi approach has, in its approach, is very compliant, is law-abiding, is predictable. The Chandravanshi approach, what is translated as the feminine approach in English, is very rebellious, is passion-driven, right? And neither way is better or worse. Both have their strengths and weaknesses, So a Suryavanshi approach or a masculine approach is very efficient, is very just, is very predictable. But when a masculine approach is taken to an extreme, it can become fanatical, it can become rigid, it can become very violent, it can become very bad for the weak in that society. Whereas Chandravanshi approach, the feminine approach, the strengths are it's very freedom loving, it's very creative, it's very passionate, it's very caring, especially for the weak in the society. But the downside of that approach is it can become debauched, it can become decadent, it can become irresponsible, correct? So you have to, be aware of who you are, and then be aware of the plus sides and the downsides, and then try and build on your plus sides, try and mitigate and control your downsides. So what do you think India is like? Is India more Suryavanshi masculine or Chandravanshi feminine? Are we more compliant, orderly, or are we rebellious, crazy? We are rebellious, right? We are more Chandravanshi. So this is actually one of the, there are so many people who come and tell me, why can't India be like China? Well, India can never be like China. We are not that kind of culture. China is a very compliant society. They are, at this point of time in their history, they are in a way a Suryavanshi society. Whereas India at this point of time is a Chandravanshi society. We are a rebellious, freedom-loving people. So we can be the best of who we are. We cannot be like the Chinese. We shouldn't even try to be.
And in the section called social issues, you have mentioned that a society, as we are talking about societies in general, society won't change unless it is ready for change. A change cannot be forced onto a society, something like that.
Not in a society like India.
Okay.
A society like China, which is compliant, perhaps. Maybe a leader can just enforce change, or a society like Russia, for example. A leader can enforce change, like Catherine the Great. Actually, through just the sheer force of her personality, changed Russia. And Russia is in a way a bit of a Suryavanshi society, at least for the last few hundred centuries. India, we're a very rebellious society. So if you want to cause change in India, you actually have to take the long, hard route, which is you have to go district by district, people to people, speak, convince, debate, and then change will emerge from the bottom. It's like one of the greatest sons that Mother India has ever produced. You know, Adi Shankaracharya ji. He came right here from Kerala. How did he cause change in the 7th, 8th century when he caused such massive change across India? How did he cause change? Did he just take on power and just enforce it? Did he do that? No, right? He traveled all over India, went district to district, spoke, debated, convinced people, and then caused change to happen. That is the way you can make change within India, because we are a rebellious society. So we have to be convinced from the bottom up. Things cannot be enforced from the top down. In India, it's difficult.
Okay. I don't know if this is political. I know you won't answer political questions, but talking about enforcement of laws, as a society, we here in Kerala, do you think, you have been watching the Sabarimala issue and all, do you think we were not ready for such a, as a society, we were not ready for change? Do you think so?
Okay, let me address this in two different perspectives. One is the issue of women's rights in India. This is something that I think is the biggest social fight in India today. And I try and pick that try and fight that fight through all my books. In fact, our ancient scriptures say that the gods abandon the land where women are not respected. Ancient India was one of those societies. We are the last surviving goddess worshipping culture in the world. Every other goddess worshipping culture has been wiped out, actually. We were the kind of society where in ancient times we had women kings, women rulers, like Rudrama Devi was from Andhra, women warriors, and I'm talking historical, not mythical. We had women prophets and messiahs. You know, what is our oldest Indian scripture? Rig Veda? Yeah? So Rig Veda is essentially hymns written by rishis and rishikas. They are the equivalents of prophets and messiahs of ancient times. We had rishikas who wrote hymns in the Rig Veda, women rishis. That was the status of women in ancient India. So I always say that those of us who fight for women's rights or equality between men and women are not being less Indian. We are in fact being more Indian, because that's what our ancient culture was. That's as far as women's rights is concerned. I think though, Sabarimala ji is actually a different issue. It is, in my opinion, perhaps many people actually have not understood what the issue is at its core about. And one of the things I always say is that when you're looking at an issue, rather than looking at practices, look at the philosophical roots of it. Philosophical roots of where that practice emerged. So for example, all of you would know that within the Kartik month, Indians across, even people like Shaivites, I'm a Shaivite, or Shaktas who eat meat, in the Kartik month we are told not to eat meat. Correct? I don't know if it's there in Kerala, but across India it is. In Kartik month we don't eat meat. So even those of us who eat meat, in Kartik month we don't eat meat. And I'd asked my grandfather, who was a Pandit in Kashi, what's the reason for this? Why in this month? And it said actually if you look across India, and many of the medium or large sized animals who would get eaten, this is actually the breeding season for them. Okay, so there was a philosophical underlying behind that practice, that if you kill and eat animals in this month, you're not just killing, if you kill an animal in this month, you're not just killing an animal, you're killing an entire generation.
Yeah.
So in this month, don't eat meat, don't kill animals.
Yeah.
Let them, don't disturb them when they are breeding.
Yeah,
Right?
that's very interesting.
That's a philosophical root behind that. But that philosophical root has been forgotten. People just know the practice. It's the same, think of the philosophical roots behind Sabrimalaji. Many of us, the method of worship that most of us have is actually what is called the grihastha route, the householder route, right? Most of the Hindus across India and Christians and Muslims also, the form of worship that we have is actually the grihastha route, where we actually celebrate relationships.
Yes.
Right? The form of worship is about celebrating, the philosophy at the heart of it is celebrating relationships, husband-wife relationship, parent-child relationship, teacher-student relationship, ruler-ruled relationship. All the forms of worship essentially celebrate relationships, which is the grihastha route, okay, which is the householder route. In ancient India, the sannyasa route was actually quite big, but it has reduced in importance over the last few centuries. So for example, many of the rock cut temples that you see, in Ajanta Ellora, for example, those were the sannyasa route. So they had their temples too. Now in the sannyasa route, in Christianity and Islam also have the sannyasa route, but not for worshippers, only for priests. So priests or nuns can follow the sannyasa route, where they're detached from all the rasas of life, right? All the pleasures of life,
Yeah.
but not for worshippers. Even the Buddhists and Jains actually have monk orders where you have to become a full-time, a lifelong sannyasi. There's a male route, there's a female route, right? Sabrimala, what is at the heart of it is actually the sannyasa route, right? Which is why you'll find even the 41-day vratam. If you actually realize the philosophical route is the sannyasa route, but it's not a lifelong sannyasa.
Temporary.
It's like a temporary 41-day sannyasa. Okay. So you get a taste of the sannyasa route. Some will get so inspired by that they may become ajivan sannyasas or that full lifetime sannyasas, or some will go back to their grihastha life. So there is a male sannyasa route, there's a female sannyasa route, like Gorakhnath temple in the north. It's a male sannyasa route, right? Sabrimalaji temple in the south is actually a male sannyasa route. There are female sannyasa temples as well,
Also, yeah.
like Kumari Amman, etc. If you understand this, then the vratam also makes sense. If you notice, what are the vratams? That you cannot eat meat, you cannot drink alcohol, you have to sleep on the ground, right? It is essentially the life of a sannyasa, right? Of a renunciate. So actually, and in that, of course, you cannot have, sex either. And both female and male. So you will find the female sannyasa route, only young boys are allowed, adult males are not allowed in the female sannyasa route temples. In the male sannyasa route, menstruating women aren't allowed. This is actually about sannyasa. It
So
is
it's not
not
about,
about gender.
Okay.
And I think in this entire debate, this core issue has been lost. The philosophy at the heart of it is sannyasa, is renunciation. But it's a 41-day renunciation. It's like you're getting a flavor of what sannyasa is. If you're inspired by it, become an ajivan sannyasa.
Yeah. Or go back.
Or go back to grihastha. That's okay.
Talking about Sabarimala, it's a personal question. Would you contemplate writing a book on our Ayyappan and Sabarimala, the intriguing brahmachari god?
I certainly have an idea in mind on Lord Ayyappa. I find him very inspiring. And because the belief is, and the received belief is that he is the child of Lord Shiva and Lady Mohini.
Yes.
So he is in a way, a confluence of the Shaivite and the Vaishnav paths. And I have a story idea in mind for Lord Shiva, Lady Mohini as well, which I hope to write inshallah sometime. And related to that is a story on Lord Ayyappa too. So let's see.
Yeah.
I
We
have
are
lots of
looking
book
forward
ideas
to
too,
it.
right? Let me see where it goes.
Yeah. And coming back to the issues, you always very vehemently write about women's issues, women's oppression and all. Uh, you might have heard about this matrilineal system, which was very rampant in Kerala.
Yeah, it was very, yeah.
Do you think we as Kerala women, we used to get a more prestigious position in the society and family? Do you think this matrilineal system could be an answer to women's oppression and all?
In many ways, yes. And in fact, actually, Kerala was the last surviving matrilineal
Yeah.
system. There were matrilineal systems across India in ancient times. And not just matrilineal, there were matriarchal systems as well. But in some of those matriarchal systems, the issue was more about rights for men.
Yeah, it is.
So look, the thing that I keep speaking repeatedly on, okay, is that perhaps a mistake that many liberals make in India is that they keep quoting Western examples, and that is not going to work. Because what that does is gets many Indians to get irritated, right? Why can't we quote our own examples? Examples linked to our own soil, linked to our own roots. So if we are talking about, women's rights, to not just read but to write scriptures, quote the examples of Maharishika Maitreyi, Maharishika Indrani from the Vedic age. If we are talking about the the rights of women to rule, to run a state, run a country, why can't we quote the examples of the Bhopal Begums, for example? A part of my family lived in Bhopal, therefore I know. Sadly, most people in India don't know. There was a amazing line of queens, of Begums in Bhopal, and the royal line used to pass from the mother to the daughter. Okay, and they were Muslim women. Okay, Muslim Begums. Why can't we quote these examples rather than quoting some American or British example, which most Indians will say, boss, what's it to me, man?
Yeah.
Correct? Why can't we quote the example of Rudrama Devi? Why can't, like Adi Shankaracharya ji, one of the greatest debates that he had was with Mandanamon in Ujjain. Anyone knows who was the judge of that debate? It was one of the greatest debates in history. Okay, and I'm sure you know that the judge can only be the judge when he or she has more knowledge than even the people debating.
Exactly.
So imagine this was a debate in which Adi Shankaracharya ji himself was taking part. Who was the judge? Does anyone know? Who's the judge, sir? Right, sir. Ubhay Bharti, applause for him, applause for him. The judge of that debate was Ubhay Bharti, a woman. A woman. Now, none of this is taught to us in our schools. So many of us, many Indians who get educated assume that our culture is about oppressing women. Nonsense. Our ancient culture is the exact opposite of that.
Okay.
But we need to quote these examples. And it's not just about, because it's the moral or the dharmic thing to do, because it will be a better society when men and women are equal. It's also the patriotic things to do. How can our country develop if 50% of India is oppressed?
Yeah, talking about patriotism, you have compared, it's an interesting comparison between Swadharma and Rajya Dharma. And can you please explain about it?
Okay. This is I make this point in an article that, Swadharma is in a way finding purpose in your life, doing something that gives you purpose. Okay. And I use the example of the British rule to speak of this. I know many of us believe that the British conquered India because there were many traitors within India who sided with the British. I know many of us believe that. In some ways it's true also. But people who sided with the British, were they only doing it for money? Like for example, you do know in the First World War, there were many Indians who joined the army, the British Indian Army, to go and kill Germans and Turks in Europe. No one thought, Maro su boss, what's it to me? Correct? The 1857 rebellion, okay? The people fighting on the Indian side were of course Indians. But the soldiers fighting on the British side also, who were they? They were also Indians. And they were willing to die for the British. That's not being a traitor. They were willing to die for the British. Why were they willing to do that? Die for a foreign invader who is destroying our motherland. Why were they willing to do that? Because that's not a selfish reason, no. I can understand if you know, like there were, essentially the British Raj was built on the biggest drug smuggling racket in the history of humanity, right? They used to grow opium in India and export it to China. Because of that, there were massive famine deaths in India because farmers were forced to grow opium, they couldn't grow food, and massive addiction deaths in China. Okay, there were many Indian businessmen and Chinese businessmen who sadly collaborated with the British on this. Any Indian business house which began pre-1870, all of them began as drug smugglers. Okay, it's a sad fact. Most of them. Now there you can understand, yes, they were doing something selfish. They were destroying their motherland and making money from it. But a soldier who died in 1857 fighting for the British, how is he being selfish? He died for the British. Why did he do that? The theory, and this was something I used to keep struggling with. Why did Indians do this? And the theory that struck me, perhaps many Indians did it out of Swadharma. It's like there were people whose Swadharma was to be a good warrior. Okay. And that is all. They weren't really thinking of the larger picture. Like one of the communities that remained loyal to the British in 1857 was the part that is now Pakistani Punjab, okay, which is why they dominated so much in the British Indian Army. They remained loyal to the British in 1857, and they used those troops and the Gurkhas to kill many of the Indian side people. Those people were willing to die for the British. But they were also for history among the greatest warriors the world has ever seen. So their Swadharma, their purpose was to be a good warrior. They didn't care which side they were fighting on. Okay. So could it be that sometimes your sense of purpose itself is going against your community? Then should you step back and think? Now if you think about it from this perspective, do you find many businessmen, okay, who do a lot of charity work also, but their Swadharma, their sense of purpose is to create a great business and to make profits? You find many American businessmen like this, right? But they often hurt their own country and they don't care. They are more bothered about their company. Have you seen this? Many. And those guys get their sense of purpose from being good businessmen. The point I'm trying to make is you should have a sense of balance. You should have a sense of purpose. Exactly. But you should think of your community too. Because if you're destroying your own community, your Swadharma is actually destroying your family. Is that wise? That's the point I try to make.
You have to get a
fine balance. Fine balance.
Yeah. And talking about Swadharma, in the personal musings section, you wrote about how you came to find your own Swadharma. My question is, we could be misled. Like, I think that this is my Swadharma, and how do you find what is your real Swadharma?
Good question. How many of you are in love? No one? Just one? Okay. That's it? What is this? Okay. Those of you who are in love, answer, how did you know you're in love? Is there a balance sheet that you draw up? Is there, is there a scorecard or something? Huh? You just know, right? You just know. And sometimes, maybe 20 years later, you realize, yaar, maybe I made a mistake. Okay? Acha, okay, some people don't.
His wife must be sitting somewhere here.
Okay, I guess your wife is here. So, the thing in this is finding your Swadharma is like being in love. Okay? Now don't tell me none of you kids have ever been in love. What nonsense, you expect me to believe this or what? Okay. But you just know, right? And sometimes you realize that maybe that was my Swadharma earlier, maybe it's not my Swadharma now. Like maybe I was in love earlier, maybe I'm not in love now. It happens. But essentially the only person you can know is you. And the only way you can know is you just know. No one needs to tell you. There's no scorecard, there's no balance sheet. You just know. From the depth of your soul to the edge of your hair, you just know.
Now, I'll go to a more serious question. There's a chapter called The Bane of Caste System. And there is none other than Mr. Amish who can talk about it, because he has dropped his surname because it's a caste name. So in the chapter called The Bane of Caste System, you're once again vehemently denouncing the caste system. But in the chapter, you haven't pointed out how we could eradicate this evil from the society. Do you think caste-based reservation is the answer?
Honestly, I don't know. It's a difficult thing to say because it's not an easy answer. There has been more movement in weakening the oppression of the caste system in the last 70 years than in the last 500 years, and that we cannot deny. Part of it has been the reservation system. Does it lead to its own inequities? Yes, that could also be true. It's a difficult answer. But the point, like I said, remember what I said about causing change in India. If you want to cause change in India, you have to do it the hard way. You have to go district by district, people by people, speak, convince, debate. And that's the thing I'm trying to do through my books. Dr. Ambedkar, one of the I think misfortunes that happen in the Indian education system is all of us have heard of Dr. Ambedkar. Very few of us have actually read his books. Okay, because it's not taught to us in our education system, and most people don't read his books. And his books are all out of copyright now, so they're available free on the internet. I know even my books are there on the internet, but that's illegal. It's pirated. You're supposed to buy the book legally. But Dr. Ambedkar's books are out of copyright, so you can legally read it free on the internet. There's a book of his called Who Are the Shudras, where he uses textual evidence to theorize that when and where did the caste system emerge. And he uses textual evidence to show that actually every society has a hierarchy. That's, even the animal kingdom has hierarchy. The thing is it based on birth or is it based on merit? Is it based on your karma or is it based on your janma? Okay. Right? Dr. Ambedkar shows through textual evidence in ancient India it was not based on birth. Okay. And his theory is somewhere between 1500 to 2000 years ago, it slowly started becoming based on birth. And then around 1000 years ago, it became rigid. Why that happened, I don't know. Okay. One of the things I try and do is keep quoting examples from our past to show that what we are doing today is actually against our own ancient way of life. So for example, everyone has heard of the Bhagavad Gita? Huh? Everyone who has actually read the Bhagavad Gita? Okay, applause for her. What's her name? Applause for her. Fantastic. Okay. There's a line and Bhagavad Gita is essentially Lord Krishna's words to Arjun. And there's a line in the Bhagavad Gita where Lord Krishna says, Chaturvanyam maya shrushtam guna karma vibhagasha. He says that he created the four varnas based on guna and karma. Guna is attributes, karma is deeds. He doesn't mention birth anywhere. Nowhere. It's not supposed to be based on birth. Which is the original Ramayana? The first Ramayana? There are many versions of the Ramayana, right? Well, you don't get to answer. I assume you'll know the answer. Okay, who else can answer? Original Ramayana? Valmiki Ramayana, applause for her. In Valmiki Ramayana, there's a rishi who is an officiating priest of Lord Ram's family, of a royal family, and the most powerful royal family of that time, whose name is Satyakam Javali. Okay, and he's a rishi, he's a maharishi. Okay, does anyone know who was Maharishi Satyakam Jabali's father? Does anyone know? Did Valmiki ji know? Let me ask you that way. No one knew who Maharishi Satyakam Jabali's father was. Why is his name Jabali? Because his mother was Jabali, a Shudra woman. He was the son of a Shudra woman. He didn't even know who his father was. He was the officiating priest of Lord Ram. Because nobody cared where he was born. What they looked at was his knowledge and his karma. Okay. And he composed the Jabali Upanishad, one of the greatest rishis ever. These are the examples that are there. These are the examples we have to keep speaking of so that we can weaken this evil caste system which has hurt India so much in the last 1,000 years.
Now coming to the book's title, Immortal India. You have mentioned that, actually you have raised a question, like why did only Indian civilization survive? So many great world civilizations has disappeared from the earth. So how did it happen in your opinion?
Okay, let me turn this question to them. There's this, one of the things that I speak of out there. There's this lovely, share from. I'm sorry, it's in Urdu, so many may not understand, but I'll translate it. It said that यूनानो मिस्र रोमा सब मिट गए जहाँ से, अब तक मगर है बाकी नामो निशा हमारा, कुछ बात है कि हस्ती मिटती नहीं हमारी, सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जमा हमारा. I'll translate it. It says that Greece, Egypt, Rome, they are all dead. They don't survive anymore. But we are still here. How come there's something special in us that we refuse to freaking die? Okay, he doesn't use the word freaking, that's my addition. How come it is that we refuse to die even though enemies have attacked us for centuries? And that's a question I want to pose to you. What is it that is special about India that we are one of the last surviving major ancient cultures? We refuse to die. What is it that is special about India that we are still here? We have spirit. We have spirit. We have spunk. We have fight. Have you heard of the Spartans? Yeah, 300 of them fought. Yeah, did they lack in spunk of fight? Is the Spartan culture alive today? No, right? So then, what's different about India? How come we are still here, man? Anyone wants to put a theory out? Yeah. The way the family functions. Families. Perfect. Fantastic answer. Families are so strong, right? So that kind of keeps our culture and our strength and purpose, alive. Very good point. Everything essentially runs around the family. Yeah. Okay. So that's one of the reasons why India has remained. Have you studied ancient Carthage? Ancient Carthage, or ancient Egypt? Were the family structures weak in those days? No. I'm talking about that. Was spirituality, way of life, worship, was everything built around the family in Carthage? I can tell you, yes, it was. It was actually. Family unit was very strong out there. It really was. Egypt also, actually it was. In fact, their family units was so strong that they used to intermarry within the family also. Okay. That has various genetic issues, but the family unit was very strong. But is ancient Carthage, ancient Egypt, are they alive? Pharaonic Egypt? How come we are still alive? I'm not saying we don't have these strengths. Yes, we are very tough people. We always bounce back. Our families are strong. I agree. Okay. But is this the secret of our success? How come we are still here? Any theories? Yes, ma'am. Ah,
Adapt changes.
she is on to that. Not me, sorry. Okay. I think the really, and that's a theory that I put down out there. Okay, that, and I use, an example of a hurricane that comes. If a hurricane comes and a tree that is too strong, okay, that roots are too deep, okay, and it's a rigid, strong tree, what do you think will happen to that tree? That it cannot adjust to the wind. What will happen to that tree? It will get uprooted, right? In fact, the more rigid you are, the more difficult it is when a hurricane comes, right? But say you have grass, kusha grass, for example. It is so flexible that it doesn't even, stand up. I mean, anyone can walk all over it. You'll find many lawns, anyone walks on it, they die out, right? Have you noticed that? Because they can't take that pressure. And that is the trick, that any culture that is too rigid does not survive when a hurricane comes. Any culture that is too flexible has no identity only. Correct? So it gets walked over by anyone. What you need is the ideal mix of both. Ideal mix of rigidity and flexibility. And if you see this, our ancestors really put this deep into our culture. Okay, like the fact that all of us are proud of our own local languages, but stories will still be common across. But we will adapt those stories also. Right? For example, is Lord Ganesh respected and worshipped in the south? Yeah, Lord Ganesh and Lord Kartik, they are both respected and worshipped in the south. And Lord Ganesh and Lord Kartik are both respected and worshipped in the north. Agreed? But are the stories about them the same? Who's elder in the south, Lord Ganesh or Lord Kartik? Lord Ganesh. Who's elder in the north? Any North Indian here? Who's elder in the north is Lord Kartik. Is Lord Kartik a bachelor or is he married? He's married? He's married, no? Yeah, I'm in South India, so you'll say he's married. He has 2 wives. In the north, he's a bachelor. Okay. Now these, if you think about it, there's flexibility and rigidity as well that gets inbuilt into our way of life. Even the way we say yes or no, how do Indians do it? You don't know if it's a yes or a no, right? Because we are keeping it flexible. But we will be rigid when it comes to it. I think the real trick that we have is this ability to manage rigidity and flexibility together. What does it do? It means that we can keep the soul of the old, but we can adapt to new times also. Why did the Hellenic gods die out for the Greek people? Because the Hellenic gods were seen as passionate and willful in the Hellenic times. But then when Hellenism started declining and Christianity rose, those same Greek people started seeing those same gods as debauched and decadent. Correct? But in India, our stories would adapt. As times change, our stories would adapt, but we would keep the old soul still there. In India, you'll find it's the only place where, and there's I know there's a temple in the south called Venkateshwara where Muslims go and worship out there. Right? There's a Mount Mary church in Mumbai where Hindus and Muslims go. It's a church. Muslims and Hindus go and worship out there. What is it? It's about flexibility, but it's about rigidity, about holding on to your roots as well. Which means you will respect other cultures, you will adapt to changing times, but there are core things about you which you will freaking refuse to change. This is our core strength. The fact that we can be rigid and flexible at the same time, the fact that we can balance what a changing time needs. I think this is why we have remained alive, and this is something we should really treasure and hold on to.
he is someone who has proved the flexibility of our epics and mythology with like retelling it in a very modern contemporary way, and we have you know how popular it has become. And shall I throw you the
Yes, please, because we are.
Yeah.
I think my flight time is coming.
Okay, he has a flight to catch, so you can ask your questions now.
The audience are requested to please keep their questions as short and concise as possible, as Mr. Amish Tripati is short of time.
Hello, sir. Actually, my question is in connection with the second last question you made. That caste system was originated from your karma, not your birth. But I was curious, when you represent Shiva in your Shiva trilogy, in the beginning he is a barbarian migrant, and I was very happy that he was the first migrant who was most welcomed in a foreign land, in connection with the canon of diaspora writing. But towards the end of Oto Vayaputra, the issue of pedigree comes up. Like Shiva has a legend, he has a legendary rule. I would have been happy if he could have been a barbaric without a pedigree issue. Like he could have done better without that being born or destined to do this.
Okay. The point on that was not so much about pedigree. The point was actually about how the institutions work, the Vishnu and the Mahadev. Having said that, interesting point. I never really thought of it this way. So I will, yeah. It's not so much about the pedigree. It is about the two institutions, Vishnu and the Mahadev. Having said that, okay, interesting point. You've given me some food for thought. So I'll think about it, and I'll certainly try and adapt into a new story.
Amish said
Yes,
that Shabarimala is not a gender issue, but it is an issue of renunciation.
Sannyasa. That's my thought on it.
But then the whole issues in Kerala is over, if it is so. The Kerala, there is a raging issue of Shabarimala gender on the basis of menstruation. The women are denied entry there. So is it a part of sannyasa? Then the whole issue is over.
No. On menstruation, I must add, in the traditional Indic way, menstruation, in many of the parts of the Indic way, menstruation is not seen as unholy. In fact, in the Kamakhya ji temple, in Assam, for example, menstrual blood is actually considered sacred. It's not considered holy. Among the Aghoras, among many of the Shaivites, the process of creation and menstruation blood, trust me, is not seen as unholy. It is actually seen as sacred.
Okay. Sir,
the point I was trying to make is like there are temples like the Kumari Amman temple where men are not allowed. It is not about menstruation. I'm not saying that there aren't communities which look at menstruation blood the way it should not be. I'm not denying that. But this is actually about sannyasa. So you have to stay away from all the rasas, all the attachments of life. And what are the attachments of life? Wealth, intoxicants, meat, sex. You have to stay away from all these attachments. That's the path of sannyasa. So for example, someone who joins, say, a Buddhist order, a Buddhist monk order, either there is a separate male order, separate female order. They cannot keep any personal wealth. They have to be celibate. So there are those restrictions which come in because they are following the path of sannyasa. So that's the point I was trying to make.
Oh, so my second question is regarding, you said that Indian society is non-compliant and Chandravamshi. That could be the reason for Google says that they will not be able to run their driverless car in India and Brazil because of massive traffic violations. Non-compliance.
The benefit of that is Indian drivers will not lose jobs.
Questions?
My question
Hi.
is, if I remember correctly, you are from an investment banking background, and now you are a literary figure in the country. To the best of my knowledge, there are no traits common to both trades. How did you manage it?
No, there's absolutely nothing common. I do agree. But having said that, the traits that I picked up in my banking days helps in the business side of my. There is a business side to the creative process as well. You'll find many guys, many people who are very good artists, but are not able to make money out of it. Someone else makes money from them. So I don't, I don't hate my banking life. That was, it helped me in this part of life. Helps me negotiate contracts well, helps me manage my money. So
You still deal in millions.
how do I manage the transition? Honestly, I wish I could give a logical answer to that. The honest truth is, I actually, even today, I still don't know where the books come from. I genuinely believe it's a blessing from Lord Shiva. There's no like logical thing that I do which kind of starts the process. All I know is that I read a lot because that knowledge goes somewhere in the back of the mind. It can be used in a book, and I need a few keys to start the process of writing. So I listen to music while writing. I eat a lot of cream biscuits while writing, and those things work like keys. It just starts the process, but how the story comes, I genuinely still don't know. It just, I open the laptop, it just starts flowing. I can actually kind of see, I can see the story. You know, what I describe for you guys are scenes that I can actually see. And I describe what I see. That's the way it works. How it comes, I honestly don't know. It's really a blessing of Lord Shiva.
We regret having
this
to
the last
wind down the talk as Mr. Amish Tripati is short of time and has a
Sorry,
flight
guys.
to catch.
Thank you so much. I had a wonderful time. And sir, someday, hopefully, on the driverless question, on the driverless question, you know, in technology, there is this term called singularity. Okay. It is believed that that will be the time when artificial intelligence will become self-aware, and doomsday scenarios, they'll take over us humans also. Okay. I think the only time self-driven cars will be able to drive in India is after this moment of singularity. That's the only time technology will be smart enough.